The road from Cannes to Venice is quite long and the weather was rather dreary, occasional showers, but it was quite enjoyable because I managed to listen to a brilliant book called I Will Find You by Harlan Coben, which lasted me all the way to Venice and beyond. Then I reached Venice, where of course the car has to go on a ferry, and the ferry goes across to the Lido, where I stay and have stayed for almost 60 years in the luxurious and lovely Excelsior Hotel on the Lido in Venice. In a way it was a bit sad because I love the drive through Genoa down to Florence and Rome. It's absolutely fabulous looking at the shoreline of the Italian Riviera as you go through all the numerous tunnels and across all the bridges, including the one in Genoa that fell down, and I realised I crossed it about 150 times over the years. That was an unbelievable tragedy, and I have to say they rebuilt it within literally 2 to 3 years, and I crossed it properly last year and it's back and fabulous. The drive from Nice to Venice is quite long. It's about 7 or 8 hours drive, and I was a bit nervous because there'd been terrible rains and floods in Italy, especially in North Italy, and I was going straight through the north of Italy. However, of course, it didn't actually affect the road I was on that much. There were some drizzles and spots of rain. I didn't bother to film any of it. Funnily enough, the road I usually take, which goes through Genoa, down the coast to Florence and then Rome, is one of my favourite journeys, car journeys in the world. It goes through thousands of tunnels and over bridges, and indeed, the bridge in Genoa that I've crossed twice a year on average for about the last 60 years in my car, collapsed a few years ago, and I was at the time in Rome, having just driven over that very bridge, and it was horrifying watching the news, thinking, my God, I've been on that bridge 120 times in my life, driving one way or the other way, and I knew it very well. I have to say they did a remarkable job rebuilding the bridge in Genoa, and whilst it was down, I learnt the efficient way of getting around it, which was to go via the airport when you came off the motorway, rather than go where the signs told you to go, which actually sent you almost up to Milan and then round and back again, adding an extra hour and a half to your journey. But I spotted that pretty quickly. And for the 2 or 3 years they took to rebuild the bridge, which I have to say is an incredible bridge, was a stunning work. when you think that Italians are not famous for their efficiency and speed and quickness. They tend to specialise in manana. I was very impressed, and it is now functioning perfectly. It was last year when I was on it, but of course this year I turned off before I reached the bridge and went up north and then across the country, and here I am now on the ferry at Venice, about to go to the Lido, where the little car stays in the garage and has done for 60 years. Different little cars, of course, but still mostly Rolls Royces all the time. And then get back on it in a few days' time, having enjoyed the sunshine and the swimming on the Lido, and head back to the mainland. Thank heavens they've banned the cruise ships that used to block the view. In fact, you could hardly get to the Lido or from the Lido back to Venice proper because of these enormous cruise ships that literally totally blocked your view. Because these days, these cruise ships are as tall as skyscrapers, and they used to totally log up all this entire stretch of the ocean, of the Adriatic, between the Lido and Venice, specifically St. Mark's Square. I think actually I should probably zoom in slightly to St. Mark's Square. Let's see if I can manage. Oh, there you go. You see, the new technology is not beyond me at all. And there indeed is St. Mark's Square. We'll be returning there with the trusty iPhone camera shortly and show you around a little bit more. But in the meantime, I'm on my way to the Lido, where hopefully the weather will improve, because one of the nice things about the Excelsior Hotel is it has the most fabulous pool, and I like to swim there for several hours every day. People don't know about the Lido in Venice. I've been here for 60 years now. I came here originally when I had my first hit, well, almost 60 years, way back in the early 1960s, and I could afford to stay in a very luxurious hotel, which I have to say this one is beautiful, the Excelsior, still gorgeous. And I came here one summer, and I remember my friend from university also came, 4 or 5 of them. They could only, of course, afford to stay at a camping site down the road, but they did. And we all got together and went into the city, which is only a 20-minute boat trip, and the boat leaves every half hour from either side. And you just sail across into Venice itself to look at all the beautiful parts of Venice. But in the daytime, when the sun is shining, as it is here and has been for the last few days, you can enjoy swimming and the sunshine and everything else. The beaches are fabulous with those wonderful beach huts with the little glass balls on top of them. And then you go into Venice and it's all the usual standard things, the gondoliers and the canals and no cars, so very little pollution. And it is, of course, slowly but surely sinking into the sea. So enjoy it while we can, I say.
If heartaches brought fame in love's crazy game, I'd be a legend in my time. If they gave gold statuettes for tears and regrets, I'd be a legend in my time. But they don't give awards, and there's no praise or fame for a heart that's been broken over love that's in vain. If loneliness meant world acclaim, everyone would know my name. I'd be a legend in my time. but they don't give awards, and there's no praise or fame for a heart that's been broken over love that's in vain. If loneliness meant world acclaim, everyone would know my name. I'd be a legend in my time.
I see there's another report out saying there's not enough convictions for rape or sex offences. What I'd like to know is, do they take into account the fact that the vast majority of allegations of sex or rape or whatever are false? They're usually exaggerations, sometimes they're totally made up, but I would say in ratio it's probably about 9 out of 10 are either exaggerated or made up or completely invented or just inflated, and only 1 out of 10 is just about what actually happened. I find it rather terrifying that neither the media nor us, the public, seem to notice this. We all seem to assume that everyone who makes allegations is speaking the truth. I was sad to see Rolf Harris passed away, yet another victim of the false allegations industry. Now, don't get the feeling that I assume everybody accused of some kind of sexual indiscretion is innocent. I don't at all. I'm sure there are quite a few genuine victims of sexual abuse. However, in this particular case, rather as in mine, I'm very well aware that the allegations were exaggerated, if not entirely false. I know this because the investigator that worked on the Rolf Harris case and wrote a brilliant book, which is available through Amazon, on Rolf Harris, was William Merritt, who worked on my case as well, and is a really first-class investigator. Back in the late 1970s, there was a TV commercial for a brand of ice cream, shall we say, called the Cornetto, and it got a lot of attention. It was very funny. It was an old, famous classical melody set to new lyrics, and it sold millions of ice creams, but it also caught fire because people loved the tune and everything else. So I determined to make a commercial recording out of it, and I hired a session singer, in fact the guy who did the original vocal on the commercial, and got him to sing, wrote some extra lyrics so that the whole thing became a full-length 3-minute single, and we released it, and it did rather well. It's quite funny. I put it out under the name Count Giovanni di Regina, which means Jonathan the Queen, basically. And I think it may make you laugh while you take a look at the lovely Venice and the various aspects of it. Listen to Count Giovanni di Regina and Just One Cornetto.
Just one cornetto, give it to me. Delicious ice cream and memory of love by the ice cream side. Just one cornetto, and she was mine. Just one cornetto unlocked her heart. We were together, we had to part. The sunshine only died, too soon was ended. She went away. It was last summer that first we met. My Bella baby, how can she forget? 12 months I'm waiting for her voice to hear, for her last words to me were, see you next year. Just one cornetto she'd ask of me. Now in every ice cream her face I see. I wait, but she don't come. She loves cornetto, I give her one. But if our love can never be that one cornetto, give it to
The Grim Reaper's been at it again, I see. She popped over to Switzerland and took Tina Turner. Now, Tina Turner was not only an incredible talent, but she was one of the nicest people you could ever hope to meet. I met her several times and interviewed her. I remember once in Texas I was interviewing her, and she had the most horrendous cold, and I said, "You really ought to be in bed, you can hardly speak. How on earth can you do a show later?" And she said, "Well, the show must go on." And I said, "Well, you really should be in bed. Why are you doing this interview with me?" She said, "Jonathan, I would never avoid or try and postpone any interview with you. And what's more, I would never stay in bed with you," which made me laugh. She was actually a really nice lady. I remember at one point when all the revelations came out about Ike Turner and how he'd been beating her with a wire coat hanger. And I actually said to her, I saw her at that point, I said to her, "I've got to tell you, Tina, if there was a battle between you and somebody else with a wire coat hanger, I'd bet on you every time." And she looked at me slightly shocked that I dared say something like that, and then burst into laughter and said, "Jonathan, you've known me far too well and for far too long." She was an incredibly nice as well as stunningly talented lady, and I've got to tell you, the show she did when she had that horrendous cold was one of the best I've ever seen her do. Nobody in the audience could have guessed that she really had a high temperature, a runny nose, completely blocked up nose, and should have been in bed. A great lady, R.I.P. Tina Turner, you were a real star. So that's it for show 28 of A Victim Bites Back here in Venice, or rather on the Lido in Venice, where I'm sitting on my balcony and the sun is setting behind me. See you for episode 29.